Hi guys, in this episode we'll evaluate four of the young up-and-coming teams in the NBA, and we're looking at these teams post-draft. We look at the breakdown of the different teams, looking at which teams will look to make a move this year based on team selection and free agency moves. First of all, we'll evaluate the Boston Celtics, who placed second in the Eastern Conference in the 2017-2018 finals. We took the semi-finals to 7 games. At the hands of LeBron, we were defeated, and without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, we were still able to manage some great results in this season. So first we'll evaluate the Boston's roster, and we can now include Kyrie and Gordon, who were missing from the finals, and we look at this as a very complete starting unit. We've got three players on second or third contracts, with Kyrie up for renewal in 2019 summer, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both on rookie contracts. 3 All-Stars in that bunch. So on draft night, it was very quiet for Boston. We stayed with the 27th pick because we got somebody who we didn't expect to be around at that point, and also it was the person that we were looking to fill the void. So the only position that we needed to fill was that second or backup center, so that Al Horford had somebody coming off the bench to take some time in the center role. Last year, Aaron Baines did a great job through the postseason playing that role as a center. So Terry Rozier is also up for contract in the 2019 season. So it'll be interesting to see what Boston do with regards to his contract. If they trade him this free agency, then they could turn that into a longer term rookie contract. Otherwise, they'll be looking to pay him some big money come the free agency next year. The only person of note is that Marcus Smart's contract is now a restricted free agent, who though he's not a stat stuffer, he does a lot of hard work in defense, and although his numbers don't show, he's definitely somebody who drives the team for Boston. The other player there is Aaron Baines. We'd be looking to re-sign Aaron Baines on a contract. It was interesting that at the end of season awards that Aaron Baines was sitting at the Boston table as the representative for Boston. So that you could see some insight into that. So free agency around the corner now. Boston has limited cap space and only the exemptions to work with. We have the bird rights to Marcus Smart, and we need a backup point guard or shooting guard to come off the bench. Obviously, Terry Rozier is the backup point guard, but he can also play shooting guard. And the other one there is that without Robin Williams signing, we would definitely in need of Aaron Baines. But now that we're able to sign that center, Aaron Baines is less important to sign, but definitely still somebody who's very needed in our roster. So what do we do? Do we re-sign those two who are tried and true for Boston, or do we look to improve the roster somewhere else? Someone that come to mind is Avery Bradley. Maybe he could come back to Boston. 3-and-D guy. Probably I would rate higher than Marcus Smart, but had an injury-prone season last year. Would he be willing to come back? The other one there, being an Australian, I've always got a soft spot for Dante Exum, who's had a horror injury start to his season, but somebody who has shown glimpses and was a very high lottery pick when he was drafted. He comes up for renewal this season in free agency. So whether you sign Marcus Smart, maybe you go with Dante Exum. In terms of Aaron Baines, they'll be looking for around $5 million, the mid-level exemption for Aaron Baines. But Dwight Howard is a name that's just come up. Having moved from Charlotte to Brooklyn are looking to pay him out, and then he may be available, similar to Moose was last year for us. And if we put Dwight Howard into our lineup, that would be awesome. Jahlil Okafor is out to make a name as well for himself. Obviously, very highly rated when he came in as a rookie. Needs to do something to turn his career around. Maybe Boston's where he needs to go. And finally, similar is Nerlens Noel. Last season didn't really do him justice. Both Jahil and Nerlens are exceptional talents, but they may need somewhere fresh to start and prove their trades. So those are three options. So if we don't sign Aaron Baines, maybe there's three other options we can look at. Now we'll look at the Sixers. Philly's been linked to another big names like LeBron and Kawhi. So we'll evaluate their roster and look to what they can do for free agency. And look to see what they can do to improve on their last year's results. So last year they finished the Eastern Conference in third and were knocked out by Boston in 7 games in the second round of the Eastern Conference Finals. So Philly's current roster with JJ Redick, now a free agent, are missing that big hole as a shooting guard. So TJ McConnell, I've moved into that position based on their current roster, but they're definitely missing somebody. They also have a need to sign another center because their draft was 5 guards in their draft, and now that's left a massive logjam in the backcourt and no other center, with the other 2 centers now being restricted free agents, Amir Johnston. So Philly's got a little bit of work to do to move out their roster and get some depth in their charts. So moves in free agency. Obviously, Kawhi has been someone who's been linked to the Sixers, but more due to the assets they've got and the trade items that they've got. Plus, it's been known that the Spurs are less likely to trade to somebody in the Western Conference, especially not LA, who was the other target and who Kawhi has been known to want to play for. So maybe a 1-year loan with the possibility of re-signing him longer term, similar to what Paul George is on, is a move. So if we look to get Kawhi into that position there, his $20 million contract needs to be matched by Philly, and to do that, I look at this, that the Spurs would receive Markelle Fultz, Richaun Holmes, and Robert Covington, and to get rid of one of those log jams in the guard position, I'd also throw in Timothy with the shooting guard there, and that would allow the Spurs to rebuild as well. And Sixers is a bit of a risk because Kawhi's only there, guaranteed there for 1 year. So we add those other salaries in, and that means that the Sixers have 31 million cap space to fill that final starting position, the small forward or power forward position. So why would the Spurs do this? They would upgrade their point guard. Well, that's an argument as well because Markelle Fultz, although he's only played 9 games, has shown that there's issues with his jump shot, which is what he was drafted as the number 1 draft pick, but would definitely be upgrade to Patty Mills and Jonte Murray in the point guard position. So you're upgrading to a starting point guard. You've got Robert Covington to cover for Kawhi. Obviously, that's not an upgrade. That's a downgrade there, but it's somebody who can play that 3 and D role. And Richaun Holmes is young, power forward who can be a backup to LaMarcus Aldridge. So they've got that. Possibly they have to throw in something in way of draft picks to make that deal happen. So what moves in the free agency for that max cap spot? Or how do they get from the 31 mil to a max cap slot? So there's your 4 starters. If you trade out Bayless and maybe as a sweetener, Kyrie Thomas for a lesser contract, such as someone like Scal Labissiere, who that's 10 mil for 2, and that gets you over the line for that max cap spot. So you've got the 4 starters, so an possible all stars. Saric is probably it's a 3.5 more than the big 4, but it's definitely Ben Simmons, Kawhi Leonard, and Joel Embiid are all possibilities for all stars next year, and a max cap slot for, I would say, not LeBron. I would be going after Paul George. So you look at the defense in that there. You've got Ben Simmons, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George, who are all big-time defenders. Joel Embiid was paying out DeAndre Jordan to say that the difference between those two was that he plays defense, so maybe he needs to prove that. But those some quality bigs. That's a big lineup and tough to break down. You've got shooting, you've got defense. That's a really good starting 5. And then all you need to do is you just need to find those 2 front court players to fill out the rest of that roster with vets who are chasing a title. So similar to what Golden State did with West. David West came in chasing the title. You fill out those rosters. Michael Beasley, maybe even a Dwayne Wade could go into that position there as a vet that after that one title to finalize his career. But there's plenty of options in that respect for that backup forward positions. So the third team we'll evaluate now is the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas obviously proved that they're to move up in they're tired of losing and they want to do something to farewell Dirk Nowitzki by trading up for their rookie in Luka Doncic, and so that's a big 4 as their starting rosters with a max cap slot for the center position. So Dennis Smith and Luka Doncic, they'll obviously need somebody there at the center position as a rim protector. Harrison Barnes is a good all-round player, but Dirk is probably only good for 20 minutes a game and limited defense now that his mobility is gone. So what can you do with that max cap slot? And I would suggest that they could go after DeMarcus Cousins. That starting 5 there with Cousins, Smith, Doncic, Barnes, and Nowitzki, while aren't the best defensively, they'll be very fun to watch. And the rest of the rosters are the issue for Dallas. They've got a number of B-grade contracts and players that they need to deal with. One good signing, and this is somebody in a previous episode that I've talked about, is Jalen Brunson in the point guard position there. That he was a good signing. Villanova's point guard from last year. The final team I'll evaluate now is the team with the worst record in the NBA last year, who were tanking for the majority of the year and ended the season 15th position, the Phoenix Suns. So Phoenix is tired of losing, and that was evident by their draft moves in the previous draft, and as well as the number 1 draft pick and signing DeAndre Ayton, they moved up in the draft to sign Mikal Bridges, which was at the expense of possibly a very good pick in the 2021 Miami pick to make that deal happen. But what that means is that they're tired of losing, and that it's time to start winning some games. So with Booker, Josh Jackson, DeAndre Jordan, and Mikal Bridges, they're still in need of a point guard or a starting point guard. And those starting salaries all on a rookie contract. So the Suns, while they've got 4 big names, they're up and coming names, and they're definitely not somebody who'll be possibly playoff contention, but definitely not somebody who'll be title contenders for next year, but definitely in the future. So the Suns' current bench roster is where the issues are. As well as those contracts that you can see there, that were all on rookie scale contracts, they've got a number of other issues that they need to deal with. They've got 17 players on their roster with the 4 draft picks that they've just drafted in the recent draft, with George King and Ali Okobo from France, as well as DeAndre Ayton and Michael Bridges. So you add in their contracts, and then you start to add in the other contracts that exist on the bench. So you start with Alan Williams, but wait, there's more. Jared Dudley's 9.5. TJ Warren's 11.7, which they signed last year, a four-year contract starting. Next year it goes down to 10. Sorry, the 2019 season it goes down to 10 and then starts moving up from there. 13.5 for Tyson Chandler and 14.6 for Brandon Knight, which was unfortunate because he went down with ACL injury. But he's a wild card for next year. If he can get back to where he's at, then that he would be considered a starting point guard in any position or any team. But that's a lot of money for considering their starting 5 are all, or the starting 4 are all on a rookie contract. The good thing is that Tyler Ulis and Devon Reed are both unguaranteed contracts. So if you can remove them from there, but the bench salary is still $63.6 million. So free agency, and there is some money there available, is something that they need to look at. So the first option that I've given is that we try and get rid of that Jared Dudley contract, and somebody who's not in a happy position at Washington is Mersan Gortat. There's been a rift between him and John Wall, and it's been widely known. So maybe can get him for limited outlay. So if you match his contract, for contract matching purposes, Tyler Ulis could be a sign and trade to extend his 1.5 mil and then trade him on. But then you need something to sweeten that deal. All of those players are also on a 1 year, so they'd be free agents next year. So that money would come off Washington's books. But they may need to sweeten it. They've got their own first round, or they've got their own second round draft pick in 2019. So something along those lines. Now, why would Washington make that trade? Well, look at that, 124 mil this year and 124 mil next year, and that's only 10 contracts. So they're already paying the luxury tax, and they're not even a title contending team. You got Merson and Wall, who have been linked to have issues, and they're well over the cap with only 10 roster spot fills for next season. So there's 4 slots that they need to fill still. Plus, in 2019-2020, they've only filled 4 slots and are over the cap, although the cap is expected to extend out. So this fills out a team on expiring contracts and a look to rebuild in 2019. Option 2, which I feel is a better option, is that the Suns look to sign Hassan Whiteside. So obviously last year's playoffs weren't great for Hassan. He went missing in the finals, got done by Joel Embiid. He's a big character, and he hasn't brought his big game last year. So he's on a 25 mil for next year and 27 million player option for 2019. That contract doesn't look pretty considering his level of play last year. But what the Suns would do though is he is recognised one of the great centres, good rim protection, good on both ends of the court. He could fit in well in a new environment. So you match his salary. The salary of Marquise Chris and Dragon Bender are both rookie contracts. You beef it out. Tyson Chandler's is an expiring contract, 13.5, and Alan Williams 5.5 is both expiring contracts. So you just match it with someone like Rodney Magruder to fill in that. So that's dollar for dollar. Now, why would Miami do that? So Miami's contracts for next year are very similar to Washington. They're definitely not a title contention team. They're a borderline playoff team. Hassan went missing last year in the playoffs, and that's 25 mil. He's the most expensive player with a 27 million player option for next year. They're well over the cap with only 10 roster spots filled for next year and 8 slots filled in 2019-2020. So this trade here fills out the team on expiring contracts with a look to rebuild in 2019. The two young guys are on rookie contracts that are coming in, Marquise Chris and Dragon Bender, and the other two are expiring contracts. So that's a win-win for both teams. So there's 16 mil in cap space for a point guard, and their big four there are similar to the Pelicans, and they've got two bigs in their lineup, which is different to a lot of other teams. Devin Booker, 3-point specialist, and Michael Bridges is also Michael Bridges is also 3-and-D wing. So that gives them perimeter threat, as well as the bigs on the inside there. That might be worth chasing. And you got 16 million cap space, which this is the one that I really like, to bring in Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah, although small, and defense would be an issue here as well. This would be a really exciting starting five with 3 perimeter threats and two bigs on the inside. You could cover everything. Defense would be the only struggles here, but this would be a very offensive team, and it'd be fun to watch for the next year. And at least the fans would have something to cheer about. Then the bench unit looks much improved. You've got Brandon Knight if he comes back healthy, and Josh Jackson running in the backcourt. TJ Warren and Dudley would be up front, and you've got some young players in Okobo and George King coming in as well. And you just sign somebody on a minimum or whatever's left from the Isaiah Thomas trade. Isaiah may look to get a bigger contract on a 1 year. Like he'd go 16 mil for 1 year with a player option on the second. Or you could look to sign him with the 10 mil for 3 or 4 years. But that's a bit of a risk considering who knows what's happening with his hip. But if you got him for 10, you'd still have 6 mil to get under the cap for a center for the bench unit. And that would be an exciting team. So that's the review of the 4 teams that I've looked at for the season, the upcoming season, and free agency. We look to move that traditional lineup for the Suns and have to play with 2 bigs. The exciting thing, and from a Boston fan, I just want to see Isaiah Thomas go well next year, in the hope that next season he can come off that hip injury and show that he is a 30-point per player game and one of the top 5 to 6 guards in the league. The Mavs are going to definitely make a move next year. They're sick of losing. They've got the max cap to play for a center. Again, DeMarcus Cousins coming off his Achilles is a risk in signing that, but I think that's an exciting starting 5 for them. The Sixers could do a lot this off season and definitely make themselves one of the title contenders, especially if they're able to sign Kawhi and use that max cap or close to max on a Paul George. That's a definite starting 5 that can rival Golden State. And my favorite is Boston. That starting 5 there and the depth that they've got are next year definite contenders. If Gordon Hayward and Kyrie hadn't gone down, they would have had 2 extra All-Stars playing, and they would have taken LeBron. They would have been in the NBA Finals against Golden State, and who knows, that I dare say they wouldn't have been swept like the Bronze team had. But it'll be exciting to see what happens in 2019. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, and if you've got any comments, please make them. Future episodes we'll be looking at free agency and how things pan out, and then we'll look at the Summer League and moving forward to looking at who's undrafted and where they might land.